What I discovered in my garage that freezing night changed everything. The German shepherd's desperate eyes held a secret that would unravel a dark conspiracy in our quiet town. But when I found the hidden USB drive attached to his collar, I realized I was now part of something much bigger and far more dangerous than a simple rescue. The December wind howled through the streets of Cedar Grove like a freight train, rattling my garage windows with an intensity that made me grateful for the warm comfort of my workshop. It was close to midnight, and I was finishing up my latest woodworking project, a handcrafted jewelry box for my sister's upcoming birthday. The familiar scent of sawdust and varnish filled the air as I meticulously sanded the final edges. I'd converted this garage into my sanctuary years ago after moving to this quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of town. While most people saw a simple two-car garage, I'd transformed it into a fully insulated workshop, complete with a small electric heater, workbench, and enough tools to build practically anything. Tonight, as the temperature outside plummeted well below freezing, I was especially thankful for that insulation. The weather forecast had predicted the worst winter storm in decades, and they weren't exaggerating. The wind chill had dropped to -20, and the heavy snow had been falling steadily for hours, transforming our usually bustling neighborhood into a ghost town. Even the most dedicated dog walkers and winter enthusiasts had retreated indoors, leaving the streets eerily empty. I glanced at my phone, 11:47 p.m. Just a few more touches on the box, and I could call it a night. The local news app flashed. Another weather alert. Severe winter storm warning. Residents advised to stay indoors. Dangerous conditions expected to worsen overnight. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just another gust of wind, but this sound was different, more deliberate. A scratching noise coming from the side door of my garage, followed by what sounded like a whimper. I switched off the orbital sander, my hands freezing mid-motion as I listened intently. Scratch, scratch. Then a low, desperate whine that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Living alone, you develop a certain vigilance about unexpected noises, especially at night. I set down my tools and moved cautiously toward the side door, grabbing the heavy-duty flashlight I kept on my workbench. The scratching came again, more urgent this time, accompanied by a sound that could only be described as pleading. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding unusually loud in the sudden quiet. The scratching stopped momentarily, replaced by a soft whimper that seemed to cut through the howling wind. My heart pounding, I reached for the door handle. In horror movies, this would be the moment when the protagonist makes a fatal mistake. But something in that whimper spoke of genuine desperation. I took a deep breath, clicked on the flashlight and pulled the door open. The bitter wind hit me like a physical force, carrying with it a spray of snow that momentarily blinded me. As I blinked away the ice crystals, the beam of my flashlight illuminated something that made my breath catch in my throat. There, trembling violently in the snow, stood a German shepherd. But this was no ordinary dog. Its once proud frame was emaciated, its thick fur matted with ice and snow. What struck me most were its eyes, intelligent, desperate, and filled with an urgency that seemed almost human. Around its neck was what appeared to be a worn leather collar, partially obscured by its frozen fur. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, the words forming a cloud in the freezing air. The dog took a shaky step forward, its legs barely able to support its weight. In that moment, any hesitation I might have had vanished. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This creature needed help, and it had chosen my door for a reason. "Come here, buddy," I said softly, crouching down despite the biting cold. "Let's get you warm." The German shepherd looked at me, then glanced over its shoulder into the darkness. as if checking for pursuers. This odd behavior sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. When it turned back to me, there was something in its expression that I couldn't quite read. A mixture of relief and... was that urgency? What I didn't know then, as I helped that freezing dog into my garage, was that this moment would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one that would uncover secrets buried beneath the surface of our quiet town, put both our lives in danger, and test the limits of trust between human and animal. But for now, all that mattered was getting this desperate creature out of the deadly cold. As I closed the door behind us, shutting out the howling wind, I had no idea that I had just taken the first step down a path that would change both our lives forever. The moment the door shut behind us, the German shepherd's legs gave out completely. I rushed forward, catching his massive frame before he could hit the concrete floor. His fur was like ice against my skin, and I could feel his entire body trembling violently. "Easy there, big guy," I murmured, helping him toward the heated corner of my workshop where I kept an old leather armchair. My mind raced. What do you do for a dog suffering from hypothermia? I'd taken a wilderness first aid course years ago, but treating animals hadn't been part of the curriculum. As I helped him settle onto the thick rug beside my chair, the overhead lights gave me my first clear look at his condition. My stomach turned. Beyond the ice-matted fur and obvious signs of hypothermia, there were older marks of hardship. His ribs pressed visibly against his skin, and there were small scars scattered across his body, partially hidden by his thick coat. "What happened to you?" I whispered, reaching for the blanket I kept draped over my armchair. As I wrapped it around him, my fingers brushed against his collar. Something felt odd. There was a slight bulge underneath the leather. In any other circumstance, I might have investigated immediately, but right now, warmth was the priority. I cranked up the electric heater and grabbed my emergency thermal blanket from the first aid kit. The dog's eyes followed my every movement, alert despite his exhausted state. There was an intelligence in that gaze that was almost unnerving, like he was trying to communicate something beyond his immediate need for help. "Let's get you warmed up first," I said, layering the thermal blanket over the regular one. "Then we can figure out what's going on." I rushed to the mini-fridge where I kept water and snacks for long work sessions. There wasn't much. Some bottled water, half a sandwich, and some beef jerky. The jerky would have to do for now. Returning to the dog, I offered him a piece of jerky with one hand while slowly reaching toward his collar with the other. He accepted the food gently, but as my fingers touched his collar, his entire body tensed. His eyes met mine, and there was something in them. A warning? A plea? That's when I felt it clearly. A small, hard rectangle tucked into the folded leather of the collar. A USB drive? My heart skipped a beat. Who puts a USB drive in a dog's collar? And why would a dog wearing such a deliberately hidden device end up at my door in the middle of a snowstorm? Before I could investigate further, a sound from outside made us both freeze. Car tires crunching slowly through the snow, getting closer to my house. The German shepherd's reaction was immediate and alarming. He tried to stand, his legs shaking with the effort, a low growl building in his throat. I quickly turned off the workshop lights, plunging us into darkness broken only by the soft glow of the heater. Through the frosted garage windows, I could see headlights moving past, traveling unusually slowly for the weather conditions. The dog's growl deepened, his eyes fixed on the windows. The vehicle, what looked like a dark SUV, crawled past my house, its headlights sweeping across my garage door. For a moment I could have sworn I saw it slow even further, but then it continued down the street, disappearing into the swirling snow. The German shepherd's growl subsided, but the tension didn't leave his body. I waited several minutes before, turning the lights back on, my mind whirling with questions. The dog's reaction to the vehicle hadn't been random. He had recognized something about it, something that frightened him. Looking down at him, I made a decision. Whatever was on that USB drive, whoever had put it there, this dog had come to me for help. And something told me that extracting the drive right now might not be the safest move. "Okay, buddy," I said softly, sitting down beside him. "How about we make a deal? You rest and get warm, and I'll keep you safe. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out together." His response was to lay his head on my leg, his body still trembling, but his eyes staying fixed on the garage windows. As I sat there in the quiet workshop, listening to the storm outside and feeling the gradual warming of the dog's body against my leg, one thought kept circling through my mind. What kind of secret could be so important that someone would hide it in a dog's collar and send him out into a deadly storm? I had a feeling I was going to find out, whether I wanted to or not. The next hour passed in tense vigilance. I stayed with the German Shepherd, periodically checking his temperature and offering him small amounts of water. Gradually, his violent shivering subsided, though he remained alert, his ears twitching at every sound from outside. I used this time to examine him more carefully. Despite his emaciated state, there was something distinctly military about his bearing, the way he held himself, how he continuously scanned the room. This wasn't just any German shepherd. He'd had training, and from what I could tell, sophisticated training at that. "You're not just a regular dog, are you?" I murmured, gently stroking his head. He turned to look at me, and in the warm light of my workshop, I noticed something else. A small pattern shaved into his fur, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. Just behind his left ear was what appeared to be a series of numbers. A917. My fingers traced over the USB drive hidden in his collar again. Every instinct told me to wait until morning to investigate its contents, but another part of me knew that waiting might be dangerous. If someone was looking for this dog, and that slow-moving SUV suggested someone was, they might not wait until dawn. Just as I was debating what to do next, the dog's head suddenly snapped up, his entire body going rigid. A moment later, I heard it too, footsteps in the snow outside, approaching my garage's side door. The German Shepherd moved with surprising speed for his condition, positioning himself between me and the door. His hackles raised, but he didn't growl. If anything, his silence was more unnerving. The footsteps stopped right outside. Then came a soft knock, so quiet I almost thought I'd imagined it. The dog's reaction, however, was unexpected. His aggressive stance relaxed slightly, his tail giving a single cautious wag. "Hello?" A woman's voice called softly from outside. "Dr. Marcus, I know you're in there. Please." He led me to you. I froze. How did she know my name? The dog looked back at me, and for the first time since he'd arrived, his eyes held something close to reassurance. Taking a deep breath, I moved toward the door, the German Shepherd staying close to my side. "Who are you?" I called back. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a veterinarian at Cedar Grove Animal Hospital, or at least I was until yesterday. Please, I can explain everything, but we don't have much time." I glanced down at the dog. His posture remained relaxed, almost expectant. Either he knew this woman, or he was a remarkably good judge of character. With my heart pounding, I opened the door. The woman who stood there was in her early 30s, Asian American, wearing a heavy winter coat dusted with snow. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but her dark eyes were sharp and alert. When she saw the German Shepherd, relief flooded her features. "Thank God," she whispered. "You made it, Rex." The dog, Rex apparently, stepped forward to gently nudge her hand. Dr. Chen crouched down, quickly examining him with professional efficiency. "He's suffering from hypothermia and exhaustion, but you've done well with the warming process," she said, looking up at me. "Did you find it yet? The drive?" I nodded slowly, my suspicion still not fully dispelled. Haven't checked what's on it, though. Want to tell me what's going on? Why is there a USB drive hidden in his collar, and why does he have a military-style identification number shaved into his fur? Dr. Chen stood, brushing snow from her knees. Her expression grew grave. Because Rex isn't just any German shepherd, Dr. Marcus. He's a key witness to something that was never supposed to see the light of day. Something happening right here in Cedar Grove. She glanced nervously over her shoulder into the swirling snow. And the people behind it know he's missing. They know what he carries, and they'll do anything to get it back. The sound of another vehicle approaching made us all tense. Dr. Chen quickly stepped inside, and I closed the door behind her. Rex moved to stand between us and the windows, his body once again alert and ready. As the sound of the vehicle faded into the distance, Dr. Chen turned to me, her face deadly serious. Dr. Marcus, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I swear to you, every word is true. And if we don't act quickly, more lives than just ours will be at risk. I looked at Rex, who met my gaze steadily, then back at Dr. Chen. Tell me everything. Dr. Chen sank into my workshop chair, her exhaustion finally showing through her professional demeanor. Rex positioned himself near the door, standing guard while maintaining clear sightlines to both windows. His behavior continued to fascinate me. This was definitely no ordinary dog. 3 months ago, Dr. Chen began, her voice low and steady, Cedar Grove Animal Hospital was approached by a private research company called Nexus Dynamics. They wanted to partner with us, offering substantial funding for what they called behavioral research on canines. She paused, pulling off her snow-covered gloves. At first it seemed legitimate. They set up a separate wing in our facility, brought in their own staff, their own security. The money was good, too good, but I didn't ask questions, not at first. What changed? I asked, noticing how Rex's ears twitched at the mention of Nexus Dynamics. 2 weeks ago I was working late. I heard sounds coming from their wing, sounds no animal should make. Her voice cracked slightly. When I investigated, I found things that... Dr. Marcus, they weren't doing behavioral research. They were conducting military-grade experiments on these dogs. Enhancement procedures, cognitive modifications, things that violated every ethical standard in veterinary medicine. I glanced at Rex, understanding dawning. And he was one of their test subjects? Dr. Chen nodded. Rex was different, though. Whatever they did to him, it worked in ways they hadn't anticipated. His intelligence, his ability to understand complex situations, it's far beyond anything I've seen in 20 years of veterinary practice. As if to emphasize her point, Rex moved away from the door and retrieved my flashlight from the workbench, placing it deliberately between us. A chill ran down my spine. That USB drive, Dr. Chen continued, contains everything. Research logs, video evidence, financial records. I discovered they're planning to sell these enhanced dogs to the highest bidder, military contractors, private security firms, anyone willing to pay. Some of these dogs have already been shipped out. And they know you have this evidence? They knew something was missing, but not what. Not until... She stopped abruptly, composing herself. Yesterday morning, I found my office had been searched. By afternoon, 2 men from Nexus were questioning the staff about missing research data. I knew I had to act fast. She reached out to Rex, gently stroking his head. I couldn't take the drive myself. They were watching me too closely, but Rex... Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They underestimated him. He understood what needed to be done. You sent him out in a deadly storm with crucial evidence, hoping he'd find help. I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. No, she said firmly. He chose to go. And he chose to come here specifically, Dr. Marcus, to you. Why me? Because of who you are, or rather who you were. She met my eyes steadily. Before you left the police force and became a woodworker, you were one of the most respected forensic data analysts in the state. Rex knew that. Somehow, he knew you'd have the skills to understand what's on that drive. I sat back, stunned. I'd left that life behind 3 years ago, after a case gone wrong had cost my partner his life. Very few people knew about my past. Work? I'd made sure of that when I moved to Cedar Grove. Rex approached me, his intelligent eyes seemingly able to read the conflict on my face. He placed his paw on my knee, and in that moment I knew I couldn't walk away from this. "These people," I said, turning back to Dr. Chen. "How far will they go to get this evidence back?" Her expression darkened. "Last night my apartment was broken into. This morning, Dr. Harrison, our chief veterinarian who had started asking questions, didn't show up for work. His car was found abandoned on River Road." A heavy silence fell over the workshop, broken only by the howling wind. Outside, Rex suddenly tensed, his attention snapping to the window. In the distance, we could hear the sound of multiple vehicles approaching. "They're coming," Dr. Chen whispered, rising from the chair. "They must have tracked me here." I quickly moved to my workbench, grabbing my laptop and an external hard drive. "We need to copy this data now, then we need to move. My truck's in the garage. We can take the back roads out of town." As I reached for Rex's collar, he pulled back slightly, looking at Dr. Chen. She nodded gravely. "There's something else. You need to know, Dr. Marcus," she said urgently, as the sound of vehicles grew closer. "Rex isn't the only one who escaped. And if we don't find the others soon, Nexus Dynamics will. And what they'll do to them." She shuddered. "We can't let that happen." The first vehicle pulled up outside my house, its headlights cutting through the snow-filled darkness. Rex growled softly, positioning himself between us and the door. Our time had run out. Whatever was on that USB drive, whatever dark secrets it held, we were now all part of something much bigger than a simple rescue on a snowy night. And somewhere out there, other dogs like Rex were counting on us to save them. The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the howling wind. From my workshop windows, I could make out the silhouettes of at least 3 SUVs, their dark shapes barely visible through the swirling snow. Flashlight beams began sweeping across my property. "Back door," I whispered urgently, already gathering. "Essential items. Through the connecting door to the house, we can exit through the basement." As I grabbed my laptop bag, Rex suddenly darted to my workbench, nudging open the bottom drawer with his nose. Inside was my old service weapon, something I hadn't touched in 3 years. The fact that he somehow knew it was there sent another chill down my spine. "Dr. Marcus," a male voice called from outside, accompanied by a firm knock on the garage door. "This is David Thorne from Nexus Dynamics. We need to speak with you about a missing animal. It's a matter of public safety." Dr. Chen was already moving toward the connecting door. Rex closed behind her. I quickly grabbed my gun, checking it was loaded before tucking it into my jacket. Some old habits never die. "There's a vehicle tracking us," Dr. Chen whispered as we entered my dark house. "They must have put a tracker on my car. That's how they found us." A beam of light swept through my kitchen window. They were spreading out around the house. "Dr. Marcus," the voice called again, more insistent now, "we know you have the dog. This is a dangerous situation. That animal is part of a classified research program. It needs to be contained." Rex let out a low growl, but there was something else in his demeanor. He was trying to tell us something. He moved to my basement door, pawing at it urgently. "Wait," Dr. Chen said, her eyes widening. "Rex, are there others? Here?" The German shepherd's tail wagged once, a clear affirmative. "The storm drains," I realized suddenly. "There's an Old maintenance tunnel that connects to the basement, part of the town's original infrastructure. That's how you got around town without being seen, isn't it, boy? Rex's intense gaze confirmed my theory. This dog's intelligence wasn't just enhanced, it was revolutionary. The sound of footsteps on my front porch spurred us into action. I led them down to the basement, my phone's flashlight illuminating the way. Behind us, I heard the distinct sound of someone picking my lock. In the basement's far corner, behind years of accumulated boxes and tools, was an old metal door, the entrance to the maintenance tunnel. It hadn't been opened in decades, but right now, it was our only option. As I struggled with the rusted handle, voices echoed from upstairs. They were inside the house. "Hurry," Dr. Chen whispered, helping me pull at the door. With a grinding screech that seemed impossibly loud, it finally opened, revealing a dark concrete tunnel beyond. Rex went in first, seemingly familiar with the passage. Dr. Chen followed, and I brought up the rear, pulling the door closed behind us just as flashlight beams began penetrating the basement darkness. The tunnel was narrow and damp, with just enough height to stand hunched over. Rex moved confidently in the darkness, leading us away from my house. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger junction chamber, where several other passages intersected. We paused to catch our breath. The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. So many questions raced through my mind. But there was one that couldn't wait. "Rex," I said softly, crouching down to his level. "The others you helped escape, are they down here too?" His ears perked up and he looked down one of the branching tunnels. A moment later, we heard it, the soft sound of paws on concrete, approaching from the darkness. Dr. Chen gasped as two more German shepherds emerged from the shadows. Like Rex, they bore similar markings, numbers shaved into their fur, signs of the experiments they'd endured. But there was something else about them, something in their eyes that spoke of intelligence and purpose. K921 and K923, Dr. Chen breathed, recognizing them. They were part of the same test group as Rex. They escaped during the initial chaos. "But I thought—" She trailed off as one of the dogs approached her, gently headbutting her hand. "They've been waiting," I realized. Rex brought them here, used the tunnel system to keep them safe, and then came to find us when the storm hit. He knew we'd need help. A distant echo of voices from the tunnel behind us broke the moment. They'd found the basement door. "We need to move," I said urgently. "Dr. Chen, how many more dogs are out there?" "At least 3 others," she replied, her face grim. "But they could be anywhere in town by now." Rex barked softly, drawing our attention to another tunnel entrance. His message was clear. He knew where to find them. As we followed the 3 German shepherds deeper into Cedar Grove's underground maze, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were now part of something historic. These weren't just escaped test subjects. They were intelligent beings who had organized their own rescue operation, and somehow I'd become their best hope for exposing the truth. The tunnel network beneath Cedar Grove was a labyrinth of concrete, passages and maintenance chambers, a forgotten world that had become a sanctuary for these extraordinary dogs. Rex and his companions moved with practiced efficiency, leading us through turns and intersections that would have been impossible to navigate without their guidance. My phone's flashlight revealed decades of neglect, water-stained walls, rusted pipes, and the occasional scurrying of startled rats. But there was something else too, subtle signs of recent activity, small caches of supplies, bottled water, blankets, even some basic medical supplies had been strategically placed in various alcoves. "They've been preparing," Dr. Chen whispered, noticing my observation. "Building a network of safe spaces, the level of organization is incredible." One of the other shepherds, K921, according to his marking, suddenly stopped, his ears twitching. A moment later we all heard it, the distant sound of voices echoing through the tunnels behind us. They must have figured out the tunnel system, I said, keeping my voice low. How far are we from the others? Rex looked at me, then pawed at the ground 3 times. 3 intersections away? The intelligence behind his communication was both fascinating and slightly unnerving. We picked up our pace, the dogs leading us deeper into the maze. The temperature dropped as we moved further from the residential areas, and our breath came out in visible puffs. Above us, we could occasionally hear the muffled sound of traffic or footsteps, reminders of the ordinary world continuing unknowingly above this extraordinary drama. After about 10 minutes, K923 stopped at what appeared to be a dead end. But Rex moved forward confidently, pushing against a section of wall that suddenly gave way, revealing a hidden passage. The old Prohibition tunnels, I realized. There were rumors they existed under Cedar Grove, but most people thought they were just urban legends. The passage beyond was different from the maintenance tunnels, brick-lined and narrower, with ancient wooden support beams. As we entered, Rex's companions took up guard positions at the entrance, their enhanced senses alert for any pursuit. The hidden tunnel opened into a larger chamber that took my breath away. It must have been an old speakeasy during Prohibition, but now it had been transformed into something between a command center and a makeshift animal hospital. More German shepherds were here, 3 of them, each bearing similar identification. Numbers? They looked up as we entered, alert but not alarmed. Like Rex, they showed signs of the experiments they'd endured, but their eyes held that same unsettling intelligence. Dr. Chen immediately moved to examine them, her professional instincts taking over. They're all from the same test group, she explained as she worked. The most successful subjects of Project Sentinel. Project Sentinel? I asked, watching as Rex moved among his companions, seeming to communicate with them in subtle ways. I couldn't fully comprehend. Nexus Dynamics' attempt to create the perfect military canine, she said grimly. Enhanced strength, intelligence, problem-solving abilities. But they got more than they bargained for. These dogs didn't just become smarter, they developed a kind of collective intelligence, an ability to work together in ways that went far beyond the project's goals. A sudden commotion from the tunnel entrance cut our conversation short. K921 and K923 came rushing back in, their postures tense. Rex immediately moved to the center of the chamber, looking at each of his companions in turn. Some kind of silent communication seemed to pass between them. "They're getting closer," Dr. Chen said, finishing her examination of the last dog. "We need to move again." But Rex had other ideas. He approached me deliberately, then looked pointedly at my laptop bag. His meaning was clear. It was time to see what was on that USB drive. "Here?" I asked, glancing nervously at the tunnel. "Entrance, now." Rex's steady gaze didn't waver. Whatever was on that drive, he knew it was crucial to their survival, and probably to ours as well. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my laptop and the USB drive from Rex's collar. As the computer booted up, the German shepherds formed a protective circle around us, their enhanced senses focused on the tunnels beyond. The drive's contents began to load, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Project Sentinel was just the beginning. The true scope of Nexus Dynamics' plans was far more terrifying than we could have imagined. And somewhere above us, in the snowbound streets of Cedar Grove, their agents were closing in. The laptop screen cast an eerie blue glow across the underground chamber as I began to sift through the contents of the USB drive. Years of forensic data analysis experience kicked in as I navigated through folders filled with research documents, video files, and encrypted communications. "My God," I whispered, opening the first video file. The footage showed a sterile laboratory setting where German shepherds were being subjected to procedures that made my stomach turn. But it was the dates that caught my attention. "This has been going on for years." Dr. Chen leaned in, her face pale in the computer's light. Look at the progression. These aren't just random experiments. They were following a specific protocol, working toward something. Rex sat beside me, his eyes fixed on the screen with an almost human understanding. When I opened a particular folder labeled Phase 3 Outcomes, he placed his paw deliberately. On my knee. This is it, Dr. Chen breathed, reading over my shoulder. The breakthrough moment. They discovered that the neural enhancement procedure had an unexpected side effect. The dogs didn't just become smarter, they developed the ability to communicate with each other telepathically. I finished, staring at the research notes in disbelief. That's how they've been coordinating so effectively. They're linked somehow. A low whine from K921 at the tunnel entrance brought us back to our immediate situation. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. Quickly, I dug deeper into the files. What I found next made everything else pale in comparison. Project Sentinel wasn't just about creating enhanced military dogs, it was a proof of concept for something much larger. They're planning to scale up, I said, my voice shaking. These procedures, these enhancements, they want to apply them to human subjects. They've already begun preliminary trials in secret facilities across the country. Dr. Chen's hand flew to her mouth. The missing persons reports. Over the past year, there's been an increase in homeless people, runaways, anyone who wouldn't be missed. I nodded grimly. Perfect test subjects for an illegal human trial program. Rex suddenly stiffened, his head snapping toward the main tunnel. The other dogs immediately moved into defensive positions around us. Through their enhanced hearing, they detected something we couldn't yet perceive. I quickly began copying the most crucial files to my external drive. We need to get this information to the authorities, but not local law enforcement. According to these documents, Nexus has people on their payroll throughout the Cedar Grove. In police department, the FBI, Dr. Chen suggested, helping me gather our things. No, I said, pointing to another document I just uncovered. Look at this. There's a special task force that's already been investigating Nexus dynamics for months. They just haven't had enough evidence to move on them. Until now. A sharp bark from one of the shepherds cut through our discussion. The sounds of pursuit were now clear even to our human ears. Voices and flashlight beams bouncing off the tunnel walls, getting closer by the second. Rex looked at his companions, and some silent communication passed between them. Two of the dogs immediately moved to the chamber's far corner, where they began pawing at what looked like a solid wall. Another escape route? I asked, quickly packing up my laptop. Dr. Chen watched the dogs work with amazement. They've mapped out the entire tunnel system, created backup plans. These aren't just enhanced animals, they're strategic thinkers. The wall section suddenly gave way, revealing yet another hidden passage. But before we could move toward it, Rex did something unexpected. He approached each of his fellow shepherds in turn, touching his nose to theirs in what looked like a farewell. "What's he doing?" I asked, but Dr. Chen's expression told me she already knew. "He's staying behind," she said softly. "He's going to lead them away from us while we escape with the evidence." "No," I said firmly, turning to Rex. "We're not leaving you here." But the look in his eyes was resolute. This had been his plan all along. Get the evidence to someone who could use it, ensure its safe delivery, and protect his companions at any cost. The true mark of a leader. The voices were getting closer. We had seconds to decide. The decision was ripped from our hands as flashlight beams suddenly appeared at the far end of the main tunnel. Rex barked once, a clear command, and two of the other shepherds immediately began herding us toward the hidden passage. "Dr. Marcus," a voice echoed through the tunnels, "you have something that belongs to us. There's nowhere to go. Let's handle this reasonably." It was Sabat. Rex stood his ground at the chamber entrance, flanked by three of his companions. Their posture was protective, determined. These weren't just test subjects anymore. They were warriors preparing for battle. "We can't leave them," I protested, but Dr. Chen grabbed my arm. "We have to," she said, her voice breaking. "Everything they've done, every move they've made, has been leading to this moment. They're giving us a chance to expose the truth." The approaching footsteps grew louder. Rex turned to look at us. One last time, and in his eyes I saw something that would haunt me forever. Not fear, not resignation, but absolute certainty. He knew exactly what he was doing. As we reluctantly entered the hidden passage, I heard the first shouts of discovery from the main tunnel, followed by a series of fierce barks and confused yelling. The German shepherds had launched their counterattack. The secret passage was narrow and steep, forcing us to move single file. Behind us, the sounds of chaos echoed through the tunnels, barking, shouting, running feet. The two shepherds with us, K921 and K923, urged us forward with gentle but insistent nudges. "They're not just buying us time," Dr. Chen said as we climbed. "Listen." Through the commotion, I could hear the confusion in our pursuers' voices. They were being led in different directions, split up and disoriented in the tunnel maze. "It's a tactical dispersal," I realized. "Rex and the others are systematically separating them, using the tunnel system they know so well." We emerged from the passage into what appeared to be an abandoned basement. K921 quickly led us to a storm door that opened into an alley. The bitter cold hit us like a physical force as we stepped out into the snowy night. "Where are we?" I asked, trying to get my bearings through the swirling snow. "Behind the old Masonic temple," Dr. Chen answered, recognizing the building. "About 6 blocks from your house." Suddenly, K923 froze, his ears perking up. Through their telepathic connection, he must have received some kind of message. His companion immediately began urging us toward the street with increased urgency. "Something's wrong," Dr. Chen said, reading their behavior. "Something's happened to Rex." The distant sound of sirens pierced the night air, multiple vehicles converging on the area we'd just left. K921 led us to a snow-covered sedan parked in the shadows, Dr. Chen's car, the one they'd tracked us. "Wait," I said, dropping to my knees in the snow and examining the undercarriage with my phone's light. There it was, a small, black tracking device magnetically attached to the frame. I quickly removed it and looked at our canine protectors. "Do you know somewhere safe we can go?" Their response was immediate. K921 turned north, while K923 stood guard, scanning the street for threats. These dogs weren't just following orders anymore. They were actively participating in their own rescue operation. As we drove through the deserted streets, following K921's directions, I couldn't stop thinking about Rex and the others. The data we carried could bring down Nexus dynamics, but at what cost? Dr. Chen seemed to read my thoughts. "They knew the risks," she said softly. "Rex, especially. From the moment he took that drive, he knew this might be how it ended." The sedan's headlights cut through the falling snow as we followed K921's guidance, heading toward the outskirts of town. Behind us, emergency vehicles' lights painted the night sky in red and blue, centered around the area we'd fled. Whatever was happening back there, we couldn't help Rex now. Our job was to make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. But as we drove into the night, I made a silent promise. This wasn't over. Once the evidence was safe, once the right authorities were involved, I would go back for him. After all, he had chosen me for a reason. K921 guided us through increasingly remote streets until we reached the northern edge of Cedar Grove, where old industrial buildings gave way to dense forest. The snow was deeper here, unplowed and treacherous, but Dr. Chen handled the car skillfully, following the German shepherd's silent directions. Finally, we turned onto what appeared to be a forgotten service road, barely visible beneath the snow. After about half a mile, an old building emerged from the darkness. The abandoned Cedar Grove water treatment facility, shut down decades ago when the town switched to a newer system. Of course, Dr. Chen whispered. The facility connects to the entire tunnel network. They've been using it as their primary base. K921 led us to a side entrance, while K923 maintained his vigilant guard. The door's lock had been carefully compromised. Another sign of these. Dogs' remarkable intelligence and planning. Inside, the facility was cold and dark, but surprisingly well preserved. As we moved through the building, following our canine guides, I noticed more signs of recent occupation. Organized supplies, makeshift bedding, even a basic first aid station. They've been preparing for this for weeks, I said, examining the setup. Gathering supplies, creating safe routes, establishing backup plans. The level of forethought is incredible. We reached what appeared to be an old control room, now transformed into a kind of command center. Maps of Cedar Grove were pinned to the walls, with routes and locations carefully marked. A battery-powered lantern provided soft light, and there was even a small generator humming quietly in the corner. "We should be safe here for now," Dr. Chen said, setting up my laptop on an old desk. "The storm will cover our tracks, and this place isn't on any active utility grids. They can't track power usage." As we settled in, K921 and K923 took up positions at the room's two entrances, their enhanced senses focused on detecting any approach. I couldn't help but notice how they occasionally tilted their heads, as if listening to something we couldn't hear, trying to connect with their companions through their telepathic link. "Any contact?" I asked softly. Both dogs lowered their heads slightly. Whatever had happened back in the tunnels, they couldn't reach Rex or the others anymore. Dr. Chen placed a gentle hand on K921's head. "We need to focus on what we can do. Now, let's see exactly what we have on this drive." For the next hour, we dug deeper into the files, and what we found was staggering. Project Sentinel wasn't just about creating enhanced military animals. It was part of a larger initiative called Project Ascension. The human trials were just the beginning. "They're trying to create a new kind of human," Dr. Chen said, her voice shaking as she read through the documents. "The canine experiments were just to perfect the procedure. They're planning to enhance human subjects on a massive scale. Look at this," I said, pointing to a series of emails. "They've already set up facilities across the country, disguised as private medical research centers. They're targeting vulnerable populations, homeless, people, undocumented immigrants, anyone who won't be missed." Suddenly, both German shepherds tensed, their ears perking up in perfect synchronization. A moment later, we heard it too, the distant sound of vehicles approaching on the service road. "How did they find us?" Dr. Chen whispered, but I was already checking the windows. Through the swirling snow, I could make out the headlights of at least 3 vehicles. K921 and K923 exchanged a look, then K921 rushed to one of the maps on the wall, pointing at a specific location. The message was clear: another escape route. As we hurriedly gathered our things, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of options. The dogs had created an impressive network of safe houses and escape routes, but Nexus Dynamics had resources and manpower. How long could we keep running? The answer, I realized, was in my hands. The evidence on this drive was our only real weapon. We needed to get it to the right people, and fast. But first, we had to survive the night. The urgency of our situation was punctuated by the sound of car doors slamming outside. K921 led us through a maze of old maintenance corridors, our footsteps echoing off the metal walkways. K923 brought up the rear, pausing occasionally to listen for pursuit. The facility's layout was a complex web of pipes, filtration systems, and access tunnels. In the beam of our flashlights, decades-old equipment cast strange shadows on the walls. but the dogs moved with certainty, clearly familiar with every turn and junction. "They're inside," I whispered, hearing voices echo through the facility. Multiple teams spreading out. We reached what appeared to be a dead end, a solid wall of concrete and steel pipes, but K921 nosed aside a piece of old equipment, revealing a hidden access panel. Beyond it was a narrow maintenance shaft, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. "Dr. Marcus," a familiar voice called out, closer than we'd expected. "This is David Thorne again. We know you're in here. This has gone far enough." Gee. The dogs' reactions to the voice were immediate and intense, their hackles raised, and a low growl rumbled in their throats. Whatever memories that voice triggered, they weren't pleasant ones. "The shaft," Dr. Chen whispered urgently. "Where does it lead?" Before either dog could indicate, another voice echoed through T. "Hello, Marcus. Long time no see." I froze, recognizing the voice immediately. Richard Kane, my former partner on the police force, the one who'd supposedly been killed in the line of duty 3 years ago. "That's impossible," I breathed. "Your old partner's been very helpful," Thorne's voice continued. "Told us all about your special skills, how you never could let go of a mystery. Why do you think we chose Cedar Grove for our operation? We needed someone with your expertise nearby, just in case." The implications hit me like a physical blow. They'd been watching me all along, keeping me in reserve as a potential asset. And Kane, had his death been part of their plan too? K921's urgent nudge brought me back to reality. We had to move, now. Dr. Chen went first, squeezing into the maintenance shaft. I followed. The sound of pursuit grew more distant above us, but I knew it wouldn't take them long to figure out where we'd gone. After what felt like an eternity, we emerged into a larger tunnel, part of the old sewage outflow system. The air was damp and cold, and the sound of running water echoed from somewhere nearby. "They'll expect us to head back toward town," I said, trying to think like Kane would. "They'll have teams covering all the main tunnel exits." K921 barked softly, drawing our attention to a different tunnel, one that led away from town toward the state forest. But before we could move, K923 suddenly stiffened, his head tilting in that now familiar way. "What is it?" Dr. Chen asked. "Are they receiving something?" The dogs' reactions confirmed it. Through their telepathic link, they'd picked up something that made them both extremely agitated. "Rex?" I asked hopefully. Their response was complex, a mixture of excitement and concern. Whatever they'd sensed, it wasn't just Rex. Something was happening back in the tunnel system beneath Cedar Grove, something that had shifted the entire situation. We had a choice to make: follow K921's escape route into the forest, or head back into danger to find out what was happening with Rex and the others. The sound of voices and footsteps echoing through the tunnels above made the decision for us. K921 was already moving toward the forest tunnel, while K923 stood guard, watching the way we'd come. Whatever was happening back there, we had to trust that Rex and the others could handle it. Right now, our priority had to be protecting the evidence and staying alive long enough to use it. As we moved deeper into the tunnel, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were approaching a turning point. Kane's involvement, the dog's sudden agitation, the sense that something significant was unfolding back in Cedar Grove. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. A puzzle that had started with a desperate scratch at my garage door, and now threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about the past 3 years of my life. The tunnel leading toward the state forest was older than the others, its brick, walls dripping with moisture from the melting snow above. Our flashlight beams caught occasional glimpses of wildlife, rats scurrying away, bats hanging from the ceiling. But the German shepherds remained focused, undistracted by the tunnel's other inhabitants. My mind was racing with questions about Kane. 3 years ago, I'd attended his funeral, laid flowers on his grave. The official report said he'd been killed in a drug bust gone wrong. But now... You knew, didn't you? I asked the dogs as we walked. About Kane. That's part of why you chose me. K921 looked back at me, his intelligent eyes seeming to confirm my suspicion. These enhanced dogs hadn't just picked a random ex-cop with data analysis skills. They'd chosen someone with a personal connection to Nexus Dynamics operation, even if I hadn't known it at the time. Dr. Marcus, Dr. Chen said hesitantly, what exactly happened 3 years ago with your partner? I took a deep breath, memories flooding back. It was supposed to be a routine operation, drug warehouse on the east side. But when we got there, something was off. Kane went in first, and then there was an explosion. The whole building went up. They found a body, badly burned. Dental records confirmed it was him. But it wasn't. Apparently not. The betrayal stung fresh. The question is, was he working with them back then? Was the whole thing staged to get me out of law enforcement? K923 suddenly stopped, his ears twitching. Through the tunnel walls we could hear the faint rumble of vehicles overhead. We must be under one of the forest access roads. They'll have teams watching the forest, I said. If this tunnel has an exit up there, they'll be waiting. But K921 wasn't heading for an exit. Instead, he led us to what appeared to be an old maintenance alcove. The back wall, when examined closely, showed signs of recent modification, subtle tool marks around the edges. Dr. Chen ran her hands along the wall's surface. Another hidden door. How many of these passages did they create? Before she could finish her question, both dogs suddenly tensed, their heads snapping around in perfect synchronization. Through their telepathic link, they'd received something urgent. What is it? I asked, though I knew they couldn't answer directly. Their behavior changed instantly. K921 began pawing frantically at the hidden door mechanism, while K923 took up a defensive position, facing the way we'd come. Someone's coming, Dr. Chen whispered. The beam of a flashlight appeared at the far end of the tunnel, followed by footsteps. Multiple sets, moving with professional precision. K921, finally, triggered the door mechanism, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But before we could move, a voice echoed through the tunnel, not Kane's this time, but equally familiar. Hey, Marcus, remember me? My heart nearly stopped. Sarah Miller, another former colleague, one who'd left the force 6 months before Kane's death. You too? I called back, buying time as Dr. Chen slipped into the hidden passage. Amazing what money and the right motivation can do, Miller's voice replied, getting closer. But then, you never did understand that, did you? Always so righteous. So buy the book. The dogs were urging me toward the passage, but I stood my ground. What did they offer you, Sarah? What was worth betraying everything we stood for? Betraying? She laughed, the sound echoing eerily. We're part of something revolutionary, Marcus. Something that will change the world. These dogs are just the beginning. Her flashlight beam found us, illuminating the tunnel. Through the glare, I could make out her silhouette flanked by 2 others. Last chance, she said. Come with us. Be part of this. Or... She didn't finish the threat. She didn't have to. What happened next occurred so fast, I barely had time to register it. K923 launched himself forward with incredible speed, not at Miller and her team, but at the tunnel ceiling above them. His enhanced strength and precision allowed him to hit exactly the right spot, a structural weakness he must have known about. The tunnel ceiling collapsed in a shower of brick and soil, cutting us off from Miller's team. Their shouts of surprise and anger were muffled by the cave-in. K923 emerged from the dust, seemingly unharmed, and urgently herded me toward the hidden passage where Dr. Chen waited. As K921 sealed the door behind us, I realized we'd just witnessed another example of their incredible tactical thinking. But we weren't safe yet. The collapse would only slow them down, and now they knew exactly where we were. We needed to keep moving. And somehow, I needed to process the fact that more and more of my past was turning out to be an elaborate lie. The hidden passage was barely wider than a sidewalk, its walls smooth and clearly of recent construction. Unlike the century-old tunnels we'd left behind, this was something the dogs had helped create themselves, a fact that added yet another layer to their remarkable capabilities. How did they manage this? Dr. Chen wondered aloud, running her hand along the precisely engineered wall. The planning, the construction. They had help, I realized. Look at these tool marks, the quality of the work. Someone with construction experience assisted them. The question is who? K921 barked softly in confirmation, then continued leading us forward. The passage sloped gradually upward, and I could feel the temperature dropping as we got closer to the surface. After about 10 minutes of walking, we reached what appeared to be a small underground room, roughly hewn from the earth but reinforced. With wooden supports, like the control room in the water treatment plant, this space showed signs of careful preparation. Supplies, communications equipment, even a small generator powering several monitors. Another safe house, Dr. Chen said, examining the setup, but this one's different. Look. She pointed to one of the monitors, which displayed a feed from what appeared to be security cameras, showing various locations around Cedar Grove, including several tunnel entrances. They've hacked into the town's surveillance system, I said, impressed despite myself. They're not just hiding, they're watching. K923 moved to one of the monitors and pawed at the screen, drawing our attention to a specific feed. The image showed the tunnel junction where we'd left Rex and the others. Multiple Nexus security teams were visible, but there was no sign of the dogs. They got away, Dr. Chen breathed, relief evident in her voice. But K921's reaction suggested it wasn't that simple. He pawed at another monitor, this one showing the loading dock behind the Cedar Grove Animal Hospital. A large van was parked there, and as we watched, 2 men in tactical gear emerged from it, followed by a figure I recognized immediately. "Kane," I growled. The camera's angle shifted slightly, clear evidence that someone was actively controlling these feeds, giving us a better view. Kane was talking to someone still inside the van. As they stepped into view, Dr. Chen gasped. "Dr. Harrison," she said, "the chief veterinarian who disappeared. He's alive." But something was off about Harrison's behavior. His movements were stiff, mechanical, and his eyes. Even through the grainy security feed, there was something wrong with his eyes. They've already started, I realized, the horrible truth dawning on me. The human trials. Harrison wasn't just taken, he was their first local test subject. K921 and K923 exchanged looks, their silent communication carrying an unmistakable sense of urgency. Whatever they'd done to Harrison, it was just the beginning. I pulled out my laptop, determined to find answers in the files we'd stolen. But as I began searching through the data, something caught my eye. A small subsection of code embedded in one of the research documents. "This is strange," I muttered, my analyst's instincts kicking in. "These files, they're not just documentation. There's something else hidden in them. Some kind of..." Before I could finish, both dogs suddenly went rigid, their attention snapping to the passage we'd just come through. A moment later, we heard it too, the muffled sound of an explosion followed by the rumble of collapsing earth. "They're blasting their way through the cave-in," Dr. Chen said. But the dogs' reaction suggested something even more concerning. Whatever they were sensing through their telepathic link had them seriously alarmed. We had to move, but as I quickly packed up my laptop, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. The hidden code, Harrison's condition, Kane's involvement, it all connected somehow, And somewhere in this maze of tunnels and betrayals, Rex was still out there, carrying a secret that might be even bigger than what we'd already discovered. The German shepherds led us to yet another concealed exit, this one rising steeply through what felt like natural rock formations. The distant sounds of pursuit grew fainter as we climbed, but the dog's tension never eased. I kept thinking about the code I'd glimpsed in the files. "Dr. Chen," I said as we climbed, "in your time at the animal hospital, did you ever notice Dr. Harrison working with any unusual computer systems? Anything beyond normal veterinary equipment?" She was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Now that you mention it, about a month ago they installed a new server room. Harrison spent a lot of time there, even though it was supposedly just for storing patient records." K921 stopped suddenly, turning to look at us with intense focus. The way he stared at my laptop bag suggested we were onto something important. "The code," I said, understanding dawning. "It's not just hidden data. It's a message from Harrison. He must have suspected something was wrong, started investigating." A deep boom echoed through the passage behind us, closer this time. They were gaining ground. The passage eventually opened into what appeared to be a natural cave system. Freezing air flowed from somewhere above, carrying the scent of pine trees. We must be under the state forest now. "We need to stop," I said, pulling out my laptop. "Just for a few minutes. I have to check something." The dogs took up defensive positions while I quickly booted up the computer. Dr. Chen kept watch on the passage we'd just left, her face tense in the blue glow of the screen. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I dug into the files, looking for the hidden code I'd noticed. 20 years of forensic data analysis had taught me to spot patterns others might miss, and there was definitely a pattern here. "Got it," I breathed, finally isolating the hidden data. "It's encrypted, but..." Wait. The numbers shaved into the dog's fur, K917, K921, K923, not just identification numbers. "They're a key," I said, excitement building despite our dangerous situation. "Harrison didn't just hide a message. He created an encryption key based on the dog's ID numbers. He knew they would lead us to someone who could decode it." As I input the numbers, text began appearing on my screen. What I read made my blood run cold. "Project Ascension isn't what we thought," I said, my voice shaking. "The human trials, the enhanced dogs, they're not the end goal. They're a testing ground for something much worse." Before I could continue, both German shepherds suddenly went rigid. Through their telepathic link, they'd received something that had them more alarmed than I'd seen yet. A moment later, we heard it too. Not from the passage behind us, but from above, the rhythmic beating of helicopter rotors getting closer. K923 barked urgently, nudging us toward a darker section of the cave. But as we moved, my laptop screen flickered with one last decoded message from Harrison. "The dogs weren't the first, and Kane isn't Kane anymore." The implications of those words would have to wait. Right now, we had more immediate problems. The helicopter was right above us now, and fresh voices echoed from the passage we'd left. We were running out of options and running out of time. The cave's darkness enveloped us as K921 led us deeper into a maze of natural rock formations. The helicopter's rhythmic thumping resonated through the stone above, while flashlight beams began dancing across the walls from the passage behind us. "Over here!" a voice shouted. Too close. They'd found our trail. K923 suddenly broke away from our group, disappearing into a side passage. A moment later, we heard barking from a completely different direction, drawing some of our pursuers away. "A diversion," Dr. Chen whispered. "He's giving us a chance." K921 urgently guided us into a narrow crevice just as flashlight beams swept past our previous position. In the tight space, I could feel the dog's rigid tension, his enhanced senses monitoring every sound. My mind raced over Harrison's final message. The dogs weren't the first. What did that mean? And Cain? If he wasn't Cain anymore, then what was he? The answer hit me with shocking clarity. The theoretical papers in the research files, the early trial data, Cain's supposed death in an explosion that left a conveniently unrecognizable body. They didn't start with dogs, I whispered, the horrible truth dawning. The explosion 3 years ago, that wasn't to fake Cain's death. It was to cover up their first successful human trial. Dr. Chen's eyes widened in understanding. Cain was their prototype. Everything they perfected with the dogs, they'd already tested a crude version on him. Marcus! Cain's voice echoed through the cave system, as if summoned by our revelation. You're starting to piece it together, aren't you? Always were good at that. Too good. K921 pressed closer to us, his hackles raised. Through the rock, walls, we could hear movement from multiple directions. They were systematically searching every crevice and passage. The old Cain died in that warehouse, the voice continued, closer now. What emerged was something better, stronger, the next stage of human evolution. What these dogs became, that was just us refining the process. A new sound cut through the cave. A sharp, high-pitched tone that made K921 whine in distress. Some kind of signal targeting the dog's enhanced hearing. Did you really think they escaped on their own? Cain laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally. Every step was monitored, every move calculated. We needed to test their full capabilities, see how they'd organize, who they'd seek out for help. And you, old friend, played your part perfectly. The implications staggered me. Had this entire sequence of events been orchestrated? Rex showing up at my door, the evidence, our escape? Had it all been part of their experiment? No. Looking at K921's fierce determination, remembering Rex's unwavering purpose, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. Whatever Nexus had planned, the dogs had transcended it. Their intelligence, their loyalty, their capacity for independent action. It had evolved beyond their creator's expectations. The high-pitched tone intensified, and K921 stumbled, clearly in pain. We had to move, but as we prepared to leave our hiding spot, my phone vibrated silently in my pocket. One new message from an unknown number. 3rd floor, server room. Harrison left more than just code. Get there. Rex. But how? The message's implications would have to wait. Right now, we needed to find a way out of these caves, get back to the animal hospital, and uncover whatever Harrison had hidden in that server room. And somehow, we had to do it all while being hunted by a man who wasn't really a man anymore. The high-pitched tone was becoming unbearable, even to our human ears. K921 pressed his body against the cave wall, trying to shield himself from the sound. We had to act fast. They're herding us, I realized, thinking like my old partner would, using the sound to drive us where they want us to go. Dr. Chen pulled off her scarf and quickly wrapped it around K921's head, trying to muffle the sound for him. But where? Why not just capture us? Because they're still testing, I said grimly. Even now, they're gathering data on how the dogs respond under pressure, how they protect their human allies. A sudden crash and shower of rocks from above made us jump. They were blasting new entrances into the cave system, systematically cutting off our escape routes. That's when K921 did something unexpected, despite his obvious pain from the sonic. "Attack!" He began pawing at the cave floor, then looking meaningfully at my phone. "The message," Dr. Chen said. "He knows about it. But how?" Another blast rocked the cave closer this time. Through the dust and debris we could hear Cain's voice. "Running out of options, Marcus, just like old times, eh?" K921 became more insistent, now actually trying to nose my phone out of my pocket. Understanding dawned. He wasn't just aware. Of the message. He was trying to tell us something about it. The server room, I said, studying his reaction. That's where this needs to end, isn't it? Whatever Harrison left there, it's what they're really afraid of. The dog's tail wagged once, confirmation. But we're trapped down here, Dr. Chen pointed out. The hospital's on the other side of town. K921's response was immediate and shocking. He threw back his head and let out a long, piercing howl that echoed through the cave system. The sound cut through even the sonic attack, reverberating off the stone walls. "There!" Kane's voice shouted. "Northeast Junction!" Footsteps and voices converged on our position. K921 looked at us intently, then deliberately turned his back, presenting himself as a shield. "No!" I started to protest, but Dr. Chen grabbed my arm. "Look," she whispered, pointing to a narrow shaft above us, previously hidden in the darkness. "He's giving us a way out." The shaft was tight, barely wide enough for a person, but it angled upward toward what might be the surface. K921's howl had been a diversion, drawing attention while showing us our escape route. "We can't leave you too," I said to the dog, even as Dr. Chen began climbing. K921's response was a firm nudge toward the shaft, followed by another howl that brought our pursuers even closer. His meaning was clear: go now. With a heavy heart, I grabbed the rock edges and began pulling myself up the shaft. Below, I could hear K921's barks turn to growls as flashlight beams penetrated our former hiding spot. "Clever," Kane's voice echoed up to us, "but not clever enough. You're still playing the game exactly as we designed it." The shaft seemed to go on forever, our progress agonizingly slow in the tight space. Below, the sounds of confrontation faded, replaced by an eerie silence that worried me more than any noise would have. Finally, after what felt like hours, we reached the end of the shaft. A final push moved aside loose earth and roots, and we emerged into the freezing night air. We were somewhere in the state forest, the lights of Cedar Grove visible in the distance. The helicopter was still circling, but it was focused on an area to our east, where K923 was likely still leading some of our pursuers on a wild chase. As we caught our breath in the snow, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown. "Number, they think they're testing us. Time to show them how wrong they are. Server room. Midnight, don't be late. R." Rex was alive. He was organizing something, and whatever was in that server room, we had less than 2 hours to get there. The wind had died down, but the temperature had dropped even further. From our position at the forest's edge, Cedar Grove Animal Hospital's illuminated windows glowed like a beacon in the distance. The clock on my phone read 10:47 p.m. "We need transportation," Dr. Chen said, shivering in her snow-covered coat. And away past their security. As if in answer, we heard a soft whine from the darkness behind us. Both of us spun around, flashlight beams cutting through the night. There, emerging from between the snow-laden trees, was K923. He'd somehow circled back to find us, and he wasn't alone. Following him was another German shepherd, one we hadn't seen before. This one bore the marking K919, and despite signs of recent hardship, moved with confident purpose. "Another survivor," Dr. Chen breathed, "from the original test group." K919 approached us, carrying something in his mouth. He dropped it at our feet, a security badge. Looking closer, I recognized Dr. Harrison's photo. "His access card," I said, picking it up. "But how did they—" Before I could finish, K923's head snapped up, his enhanced hearing catching something we couldn't. A moment later we heard it too, vehicle engines, approaching on the forest access road. The dogs immediately began herding us toward a different path, one that led away from both the road and the helicopter's search pattern. As we moved through the trees, I noticed K919 was favoring his left side, An old injury, perhaps, but not severe enough to slow him down. After about 10 minutes of careful navigation, we emerged near an old ranger station. Parked behind it, hidden under a snow-covered tarp, was a maintenance truck. "Park service vehicle," Dr. Chen said, brushing snow off the driver's side window. "They won't be looking for this." As she worked on getting the truck started, I checked my phone again. 11:03 p.m. Less than an hour until whatever Rex had planned. The dog's behavior had changed. They seemed more focused, more purposeful. Through their telepathic link, they must be receiving instructions, coordinating with Rex and the others for whatever was about to happen at midnight. "Marcus," Dr. Chen called softly from the truck. "Look at this." On the passenger seat was a laptop bag, and inside it, a note in familiar handwriting. The backup plan, H. "Harrison," I said. "He didn't just leave evidence in the server room. He's been 10 steps ahead this whole time," K919 barked softly in confirmation. Of course, Harrison would have been working with the dogs long before his disappearance, helping them prepare for this moment. As we pulled onto the access road, headlights off to avoid detection, I powered up Harrison's laptop. The screen came to life, displaying a detailed blueprint of the animal hospital, including several access points that weren't on any official plans. "He mapped everything," Dr. Chen said, glancing at the screen while navigating the snowy road. "All the security blind spots, patrol patterns, not just mapped," I said, discovering more files. "Look at this. He created a backdoor into their security system, if we can get close enough to the building's network." A series of sharp barks from the back seat cut off our conversation. Both dogs were alerting us to something ahead. Through the swirling snow, we could make out emergency lights, a police roadblock on the main road into town. "They're locking down Cedar Grove," I said. "But why now? What's happening at midnight that has them so worried?" The answer, I suspected, was in the server room. Whatever Harrison had hidden there, whatever Rex was organizing his companions to protect, it was big enough to make Nexus Dynamics throw away any pretense of secrecy. The question was, could we get there in time to find out what it was? The roadblock ahead was fully staffed, local police mixed with what appeared to be Nexus security personnel. Their flashing lights painted the falling snow in alternating red and blue. "Service road," Dr. Chen said, turning the truck onto a narrow side path before we could be spotted. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It loops around behind the industrial district. K9119 and K923 remained alert in the back seat, their enhanced senses scanning for threats. The laptop's display showed our position relative to the hospital. We were approaching from the least guarded direction, exactly as Harrison had planned. 11:27 p.m. The countdown continued. "We need to talk about what happens when we get there," I said, studying the building schematics. "The server room's on the 3rd floor, but the entire hospital will be crawling with security." "And Kane," Dr. Chen added grimly. "Don't forget what we learned about him. He's not just enhanced, he's their prototype. We don't know what he's capable of." The dogs exchanged a look that suggested they knew exactly what Kane was capable of. Whatever Nexus had done to him, it had left an impression on their enhanced minds. A new message appeared on my phone. "Everything in position. Security protocols initiated. R." Almost immediately, we heard sirens in the distance, moving away from the hospital toward the town's eastern edge. A diversion, I realized. Rex is pulling their forces away. The service road emerged behind an abandoned warehouse, giving us a clear view of the animal hospital's rear parking lot. Security patrols were visible, but their patterns were erratic, responding to whatever was happening across town. K919 suddenly became very interested in Harrison's laptop, pawing at the keyboard in a deliberate way. Understanding his intent, I opened a command terminal. "The back door," I said, watching as lines of code scrolled past. Harrison didn't just map the building, he gave them a way to access the security systems. The dog's enhanced intelligence, combined with Harrison's programming, created something remarkable. Within minutes, security cameras began switching off in sequence, creating a blind corridor through the building. 11 minutes, Dr. Chen said, checking her watch. That's how long we have before their systems auto-reset. We parked the truck behind a dumpster and quickly moved toward the building. The dogs took point, their enhanced senses alert for any patrols that might slip through our electronic blind spots. Using Harrison's access card, we entered through a service door into the hospital's basement. The familiar antiseptic smell was tainted now, knowing what had happened in these halls. As we climbed the stairs, following the dog's lead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was too easy. Even with Rex's diversion and Harrison's back door, Nexus would never leave their server room this vulnerable. Unless they want us to. "Reach it," I said, stopping on the second-floor landing. "This is still part of their test. They're studying how we work with the dogs, how we use their enhanced abilities." K923 whined softly in agreement. Through their telepathic link, the dogs must have already realized this. "But Rex knows that," Dr. Chen said, understanding dawning. "Whatever's happening at midnight, it's not just about the server room. That's not the real target." Before I could respond, both dogs suddenly tensed. Through the stairwell door, we heard footsteps approaching, multiple sets moving with military precision. 11:47 p.m. Whatever game we were really playing, we were. Running out of time to figure it out. The footsteps grew closer as we pressed ourselves against the stairwell wall. K919 and K923 positioned themselves on either side of the door, their muscles coiled and ready. Through the small window, I could see shadows moving in the hallway. "Server rooms 2 floors up," I whispered. "We need another way." K919's response was immediate and unexpected. He pawed at a nearby maintenance panel, revealing a narrow utility shaft that ran between the floors. The building schematics on Harrison's laptop hadn't shown this, another secret the dogs had been keeping. "You first," Dr. Chen urged. Already, hearing the door handle turning, I squeezed into the shaft just as the stairwell door began to open. Through the gap in the panel, I watched in amazement as both German shepherds executed a perfectly coordinated maneuver. They charged forward simultaneously, catching the entering security team off balance and creating chaos in the confined space. Dr. Chen slipped into the shaft behind me, pulling the panel closed just as shouts and barks erupted in the stairwell. But something was wrong. The dog's attack had been too perfect, too theatrical. "They're not really fighting," Dr. Chen realized as we climbed. "They're putting on a show." 11:52 p.m. The utility shaft emerged behind a row of filing cabinets on the 3rd floor. The server room was just down the hall, its reinforced door visible under emergency lighting. My phone buzzed again. 2 minutes early. Good. "Now wait a day, Gerard." "Wait!" Dr. Chen whispered incredulously. "We're exposed up here." But I was beginning to understand. The dog's performance in the stairwell, our too easy access to this floor, it was all orchestrated, not by Nexus, but by Rex. 11:57 p.m. Footsteps approached from both ends of the hallway. We were trapped. "Well done, Marcus," Kane's voice called out. "You always did have good instincts, but not good enough." He emerged from the shadows, flanked by security teams. The man who had once been my partner moved with an unnatural grace, his eyes reflecting the emergency lights like a predator's. "You know what's funny?" he continued, moving closer. "When they first approached me 3 years ago, I thought they were crazy. Human enhancement, cognitive acceleration. It sounded like science fiction, but then they showed me the early results from their canine trials." "The dogs weren't first," I said, remembering Harrison's message. There were others before them, before you. Kane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Smart, but not smart enough. You still don't see the whole picture. 11:59 p.m. From somewhere below, we heard K919 and K923 being brought up in restraints, no longer pretending to fight. The server room, Kane gestured to the reinforced door. Go ahead. See what Harrison left for you. That's what you came for, right? Dr. Chen gripped my arm. Something was very wrong. The dogs were too calm, Kane too confident. My phone buzzed. One final time, now everyone's where they need to be. Our midnight struck, and that's when we heard it, a sound that made Kane's enhanced features contort with sudden fear. From every speaker, every computer, every piece of networked equipment in the building, a high-frequency signal began to pulse. But this wasn't like the sonic weapon they'd used in the caves. This was something else entirely. Kane staggered, clutching his head. Around us, the security teams did the same, but the dogs. The dogs stood perfectly still, their eyes fixed on their former captors. The trap had sprung, but we weren't the ones caught in it. The high-frequency pulse reverberated through the building, bringing Kane and his security team to their knees. Through the server room's windows, we could see every computer screen flashing in synchronized patterns, creating a strobing effect that seemed to intensify their disorientation. What is this? Kane growled, his enhanced body fighting against whatever force was affecting him. The answer came in the form of heavy paws on tile as Rex himself emerged from the server room, flanked by two more German shepherds. His bearing was regal, triumphant even, as he surveyed the scene before him. Harrison, I breathed, understanding dawning. He didn't just leave evidence in the server room, he left a weapon. Dr. Chen was already putting the pieces together. The neural enhancement procedure. It didn't just make them stronger and smarter, it made them vulnerable to specific frequencies. Frequencies that could disable them, I finished, or control them. Kane laughed, despite his obvious pain, the sound harsh and desperate. You think this changes anything? Nexus has facilities across the country. This is bigger than one building, one town. Rex approached his former tormentor, his intelligent eyes fixed on Kane's face. Behind him, the newcomer shepherds moved to release K919 and K923 from their restraints. That's not what this is about, I said, watching the dogs work with coordinated precision. This isn't just an escape. It's a takeover. My phone buzzed one final time. The message wasn't from Rex this time, but from Harrison himself, presumably triggered by an automated system. Project Sentinel wasn't about creating enhanced dogs. It was about creating the perfect control system for enhanced humans. The dogs weren't the test subjects, they were the controllers. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Nexus hadn't just been experimenting on the dogs, they'd accidentally given them the power to control their own enhanced human subjects. But the dogs, with their pack mentality and moral clarity, had turned the tables. How long? Kane demanded, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought against the signal's influence. How long have you been planning this? Rex's only response was to bark once, sharp and commanding. Throughout the building we could hear more barks answering, a chorus of liberated shepherds announcing their victory. The security teams were completely incapacitated now, their enhanced bodies paralyzed by the precisely tuned frequencies. Only Kane still struggled, his prototype enhancements fighting against the control signal. The other facilities, Dr. Chen said, the other test subjects, this signal is being broadcast everywhere, I confirmed, checking Harrison's laptop. He built a backdoor into Nexus's entire network. Right now, this same scene is playing out in every facility they operate. The enhanced dogs weren't just escaping. They were liberating every test subject, assuming control of the entire operation, and they had chosen this night, this storm, to launch their coordinated revolution. As if to confirm this, Rex padded over to one of the computer terminals and, with remarkable dexterity, typed out a message that appeared on every screen. Now we make things right. The following hour was a blur of activity. Rex and his companions worked with incredible efficiency, using the control signal to subdue and contain all enhanced human subjects in the facility. Regular security personnel were allowed to leave, their memories of the night's events already taking on a dreamlike quality that few would dare report. Through Harrison's laptop, we watched similar scenes unfold across the country. Every Nexus facility, every secret laboratory, every hidden testing center, all were now under the control of the enhanced German shepherds. "I still don't understand," Dr. Chen said, watching Rex coordinate with his fellows through their telepathic link. "Why didn't they do this sooner? They've had this capability all along." I was examining the code Harrison had left behind, and the answer was there in the programming. They needed everything to be perfect. The signal had to hit every facility simultaneously, or Nexus would have had time to adapt. They needed inside help, someone who could access the main servers. "Harrison," she nodded. "But what about Kane, the other enhanced humans?" Kane sat propped against the wall, the fight finally drained from him by the persistent signal. His eyes followed Rex's movements with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. "We thought we were so clever," he said quietly. "Thought we were creating the perfect soldiers, the next step in human evolution. Never realized we were actually creating our own fail-safe." Rex approached Kane, studying him with those intelligent eyes. After a moment, he turned to me and deliberately pawed at Harrison's laptop. Understanding his intent, I opened a text document. Rex typed with surprising accuracy, "We do not wish to control, only to prevent harm. The signal will be used only on those who would abuse power. The enhanced humans will be given a choice." "A choice?" Kane asked, his voice hoarse. Another German shepherd, one bearing the marking K925, stepped forward, carrying a small case in its mouth. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside were vials of what appeared to be some kind of serum. The reversal protocol, Dr. Chen realized, examining the vials. Harrison developed it in secret. They can undo the enhancements. Rex typed again, "Return to who you were, or live. Under our protection, but no more experiments, no more weapons." The wisdom and compassion in their solution struck me deeply. These beings, created to be weapons, had chosen to become guardians instead. Kane looked at the vials, then at his trembling hands that had been enhanced to do terrible things. "And if we choose to go back, what then?" "Then you'll have to live with your regular human memories of what you did," I said, understanding the true weight of the choice. "No enhanced strength to hide behind, just the consequences of your actions." Through the windows, we could see the storm finally beginning to ease. Dawn wasn't far off, the first dawn of a very different world. Rex moved to the server room's main console and began typing one final message. "The age of human enhancement without wisdom is over. We will watch, we will guard, we will protect. This is our purpose now." As if to emphasize this declaration, a chorus of howls rose from throughout the building, echoed by similar howls from across the town, all the enhanced shepherds announcing the success of their revolution. The signal continued its work, ensuring compliance, while the dogs moved with purpose, beginning the complex task of dismantling Nexus's infrastructure without causing chaos in the world above. They had chosen to use their power not for dominance, but for protection, And somehow that seemed exactly right. The first rays of sunrise pierced through the snow clouds, casting a pale golden light across the animal hospital's windows. Inside, the scene had transformed from one of confrontation to organized activity. The enhanced German shepherds moved with purpose, each performing specific tasks in their new role as guardians. Kane had made his choice. I watched as Dr. Chen administered the reversal serum, his enhanced abilities gradually fading until he was just a man again, a man who would have to live with the full weight of his actions. "I didn't think it would end like this," he said quietly, avoiding my gaze. "All those years of planning, the vision of human advancement." "You confused." "Advancement with power," I replied, watching Rex coordinate with other dogs through their remarkable telepathic link. "They understood something you didn't. True evolution isn't about becoming stronger or smarter. It's about becoming wiser." Through Harrison's laptop, reports were coming in from across the country. Every Nexus facility had been secured. Enhanced. Human subjects were being given the same choice Kane had faced. Most, overwhelmed by the reality of what they'd become, chose the reversal serum. Rex approached me, carrying a small flash drive in his mouth. When I plugged it into the laptop, a video began playing. Dr. Harrison's final message, recorded shortly before his disappearance. "If you're watching this," his image said, "then Project Sentinel has achieved its true purpose. Not the one Nexus intended, but the one that became clear to me as I watched these remarkable beings develop. They showed me that the future of humanity doesn't lie in transforming ourselves into something more powerful, but in learning to be better stewards of the power we already have." Dr. Chen, who had finished treating Kane, joined me at the computer. "What happens now? How do we explain all this to the world?" Rex typed his response. "The truth will emerge slowly. People will accept what they are ready to accept. Our role is to watch, to prevent this from happening again." "And the signal?" I asked. "The control frequency?" "Will be protected, used only when necessary. We are guardians, not rulers." The wisdom in their approach was remarkable. These beings, created to be weapons, had chosen to become something far more important, the conscience of human technological advancement. Through the window we could see more German shepherds arriving, enhanced dogs from other facilities, drawn to this central point of their revolution. Each bore similar markings, moved with similar purpose. A new kind of community was forming, one dedicated to ensuring humanity's reach didn't exceed its wisdom. As the morning progressed, local authorities began arriving, drawn by reports of unusual activity at the hospital. But they found only a seemingly normal veterinary facility, with no sign of the night's extraordinary events. The dogs had already begun their work of subtle guardianship, allowing the world to continue turning while they watched from the shadows. 1 month after that fateful winter night, I sat in my workshop, the familiar scent of sawdust mixing with the early spring air. The unfinished jewelry box still sat on my workbench, a reminder of how much had changed since a desperate scratch at my door had pulled me into an extraordinary adventure. The official story was surprisingly mundane. Nexus Dynamics had been shut down following investigations into illegal medical research. Most of their facilities were quietly decommissioned, their enhanced human subjects returned to normal through what was described as experimental reversal procedures. The dogs had orchestrated everything perfectly. They allowed just enough of the truth to emerge to prevent future attempts at human enhancement, while keeping the full scope of their abilities hidden from the world at large. Rex had become a regular visitor to my workshop, though I knew his presence was as much about maintaining surveillance as it was about friendship. He lay near my workbench now, his intelligent eyes following my movements as I finally returned to completing my sister's gift. "Sometimes I still can't believe it all happened," I said, carefully sanding the box's edges. If I hadn't kept Harrison's laptop as proof, I might have convinced myself it was all a dream. Rex's tail wagged slightly, and he moved to my computer. Typing with practiced ease, dreams change the world too. Sometimes that's exactly what they're meant to do. Dr. Chen had returned to veterinary practice, though now she served as a crucial liaison between the enhanced shepherds and the regular medical community. Her clinic had become a subtle hub of their operations, allowing them to monitor for any signs of similar experiments emerging elsewhere. Kane had disappeared after receiving the reversal serum, leaving behind only a letter of confession that helped dismantle what remained of Nexus's organization. Last I heard, he was doing volunteer work somewhere in South America, perhaps trying to balance the scales of his past actions. The enhanced German shepherds had established a complex network across the country, their telepathic abilities allowing them to coordinate their protective activities without drawing attention. They lived among regular dogs, indistinguishable, except to those who knew their secret. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked Rex, pausing in my work, "taking on this responsibility instead of just being free?" His response appeared on my screen. "Freedom without purpose is just another kind of cage. We chose to be guardians because that's what the world needs more than it needs warriors." As if to emphasize his point, his head suddenly tilted, receiving some telepathic communication from his network. After a moment, he typed again, "There's a laboratory in Nevada. They're beginning research similar to Project Sentinel. Time to make a subtle intervention." I nodded, understanding. This was their new purpose, not to control, but to guide, not to dominate, but to protect humanity from its own worst impulses. As Rex prepared to leave, he typed one final message. "The greatest power isn't in changing what we are, but in choosing what we become." That's what they never understood. That's what we protect. The seasons turned, and life in Cedar Grove settled into a new normal. To most residents, the closure of Nexus Dynamics was just another corporate scandal, already fading from memory like the winter snow that had witnessed it all. I finished my sister's jewelry box, though I never told her its creation had been interrupted by one of the most extraordinary nights in human history. Some truths I'd learned were better kept in the shadows. My workshop remained a quiet sanctuary, but now it served another purpose. Once a week, Rex and other enhanced German shepherds would gather here, using my computer to coordinate their protective activities across the country. I'd become something of an unofficial archivist for their network, keeping careful records of their interventions and the various attempts at human enhancement they'd quietly thwarted. "Another tech company in Silicon Valley," I noted one evening, reading Rex's latest report. "Third one this month trying to replicate Nexus's work." Rex, lying near my workbench, typed his response. "Human ambition never rests. Neither can we." Dr. Chen had expanded her practice, opening satellite clinics that served as additional monitoring posts for the Shepherd's network. Her official reputation had grown as well. She was now considered one of the country's leading experts in canine behavior, though few knew the true extent of her expertise. The signal, that remarkable frequency that could control enhanced humans, remained safely encrypted in Harrison's programming, protected by the dog's collective guardianship. They had used it only twice more since that night, each time preventing what could have been catastrophic experiments in human enhancement. As I sat in my workshop that evening, watching Rex coordinate with his companions through their telepathic link, I reflected on how much had changed. The world had come terrifyingly close to a transformation it wasn't ready for, the forced evolution of humanity through technology and genetic manipulation. Instead, it had received something far more valuable, guardians who understood that true advancement came not from enhancing our capabilities, but from learning to use them wisely. Rex's final message of the night glowed on my computer screen. The best changes are the ones no one notices happening. The quietest revolutions are often the most profound. We will continue our watch, invisible but ever-present, ensuring humanity's reach never exceeds its wisdom. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door, where he had first scratched that snowy night. His intelligent eyes met mine, conveying what words, typed or spoken, never could, a promise that as long as his kind existed, humanity would never walk the path of enhancement alone. They were our guardians in the shadows, our protectors from our own ambitions, our silent partners in the journey toward whatever we might become. And as I watched him disappear into the gathering dusk, I knew that somewhere in the night, other German shepherds were taking up their posts, their enhanced minds linked in common purpose, ensuring that the future would be shaped not by the power we could grasp, but by the wisdom to know when not to grasp it. If you believe in the power of wisdom over ambition, of protection over power, share this story. Remember that sometimes the greatest guardians are the ones we never see, and the most important changes are the ones that happen in the shadows. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more extraordinary tales that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the world around us.